Hi everyone. Today we did get another thrust higher, and then interestingly, we did give it all back, finishing basically flat on the day here. You can see big down candles, big volume coming through at the end of the session, finishing right at the level that we finished from the Thursday into the Friday open where we sold off. So a little bit of a movement here. I wouldn't say we're necessarily topped, but this does continue to look a little bit weaker, especially after what we saw here. Reverse that, a little bit of a pullback. Seems like these are getting just a little bit more aggressive, but let's take a look at all of the charts and see what we got for tomorrow. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. In news today, we got the Treasury Secretary Bessent coming for a review of the entire Federal Reserve. So the Trump administration continues to go after the Fed, which is not super great for markets. I would say this brings a little bit of uncertainty. It's not something we've really seen in recent history. I also saw some rumors around Trump trying to potentially indict Jay Powell around the remodeling of the Federal Reserve, which cost about $2 to $2.5 billion. And this is another instance of the administration coming out after the Fed. And he said, what we need to do is examine the entire Federal Reserve institution and whether they have been successful. Has the organization succeeded in its mission? And if their dual mandate is to maintain price stability and full employment, I would say right now they're doing a pretty good job of it. And it seems a little bit weird that they're trying to come out and say, are they doing their job? I think there's a lot of data to show that they are in fact doing their job, despite the best efforts of Congress spending piles and piles of money trying to stimulate the economy and of course affecting inflation. But despite that, we actually have a pretty good situation based on what the Fed has done in the short term, especially if you consider the little blip that we had where we had a couple of banks failing. They instituted a lending facility and that was pretty well stamped out pretty quickly. Again, another instance of them doing a good job, but Trump has been on a warpath saying he wants lower interest rates. And you see here they mention that renovation and criticizing potential cost overruns there. I don't really think this is based in reality, but if there's more uncertainty here and they continue to get more aggressive, I think that's going to be not a great situation for markets. Moving over to fear and greed, we did step down just a smidgen, 74 from a 75. You can see the momentum continues to fade, still in greed there. Strength is still very slowly trending higher. Breadth pulled back just a little bit over the last couple days. We'll take a look at that again today. That is what I'm watching most closely, at least for now. Put call ratio still very, very low. Volatility, no movement, and no movement really on bonds either. Did just see a very, very slight step higher on that junk bond ratio, but very little movement. Still extreme greed pretty much across the board. Moving over to the earnings calendar, Verizon beat pretty handily. Steel Dynamics, not so much. Domino's Pizza also missing on the earnings side, but meeting on the revenue side. So a little bit more mixed than what we saw before. For tomorrow, you get Coca-Cola, Philip Morris. Texas Instruments, want to see how they are doing, especially relative to the semiconductor space. Northrop Grumman, see how the defense sector is doing. And that's pretty much it. Not a whole lot here for tomorrow, but then we get into the Wednesday. After hours Wednesday, we get Google, Tesla, IBM, T-Mobile, Services Now, AT&T, Thermo Fisher. Tons of big hitters here for the Wednesday. So just keep that in mind if you hold anything overnight into the Wednesday. Most of this is after hours, but not all of it. Moving over to the economic calendar, not a lot for today. You can see leading index down more than expectations. Previous number was revised up slightly, so not super great there, but not a huge impact. Tomorrow you got Fed Powell speaking in the morning. That could be interesting. And then for the Wednesday, you get existing home sales. Again, not a huge impact, 20-year bond auction. And there's really not a ton of data this week. A little bit of soft data for the Wednesday as well. It's mostly going to be centered around earnings for this week. Moving over to the charts, you can see for the S&Ps, we were up $1.19 or 0.19. But look at that wick rejection. We did go much higher, new wick rejection, back down into the mid-range from the previous candle. So you did get a new relative high, but the last two candles, not looking super great. We're still holding this trend structure in here. Momentum still bearish. RSI still right there. At the SMA here, you can see we're right there retesting that level. Is it going to reject here? You have a nice little downtrend on the RSI as we continue to go higher. Some clear divergence happening there. After hours, we're kind of hanging in there, but looking at that hourly chart again, like I talked about, big move higher. gave all of that back, finished below the 21 EMA, retested that 21 EMA. Are we going to see a little bit more of a pullback down to that 55, down at 627.40? The trend support in here around 627.20. I think that's likely what we're going to get here. And if this starts to change structure just a little bit, I think there's a lot more downside to come. I've been saying that for a long time, and we just continue to march higher. But this is a very peak level. We've been at peak levels for a long time, and this again shows a little bit more weakness here. Weakness here, retracement, got bought up off of the trends, retracement, held some structure, another retracement. Is this going to be the one that breaks a little bit more? That's a lot of pullbacks in a short period of time. It seems like markets want to go back down at least a little bit. Are earnings going to push us down? That is another thing to consider here, but mixed results here. I would say neutral on the SPY. And then looking at the Tasty charts here, you can see we are right at that 8 EMA, 628.56 continues to be support. It was support here on the Friday, a support here again on the Monday. Can it continue to hold in there? Trailing stop on the 4 hour, 623.44. And then looking at that hourly chart, again, pushed right up to the upper ATR band, continues to be interesting, pushed back to bullish conditions. We were bearish there just for a second, pushed through to that, and now pulled back to the trailing stop, 628.51, but we're below that midline. We're starting to sell just a little bit more after hours, continuing to watch that big volume on the sell, not what you want to see there. So if this has any follow through tomorrow, I think that's going to be very concerning, but definitely watching it at least for now. Moving over to the NASDAQ, same thesis as seemingly every day for the last month here, grinding along this trend line, touched it just about every day, and we touched it again and closed right at it here today. Drifting just a little bit lower after hours. Are we going to hit this upper trend line around 568, almost 569 now, and then we're going to reject? Or are we going to just continue to grind here along this trend? You don't usually see it do this for so long. You can see it here from May up until about here in June, and that was about a month before we saw just a slight hesitation. Now we've been doing this for about another month here. Do we hesitate once again? RSI still super overbought, all the way up at a 73, and you can see that push through there, very, very extended. That is about as extended as it gets on the daily chart. And then looking at that hourly here, you can see pushed through that trend line, pulled back below the trend line, still holding above the 21 EMA. Wouldn't say that this is broken at all. You can see we pulled back here, got the continuation, another slight pullback. Are we going to get that next continuation to that zone? Certainly a possibility. Momentum is a little bearish. RSI just a little bit bearish here below the SMA. And again, look at that huge volume coming in on that last candle of the day, which was the big bearish candle. So volume coming through on the sell side is a little bit unusual relative to what we have been seeing through this last time period. And then looking at the Tasty charts here for the Qs, you can see we hit that upper ATR band, hesitated there, and then pulled back. Same continues to be resistance here. These ATR bands have been extremely accurate as of late, and they continue to be very accurate here on the hourly chart. Touched it here, pulled back, touched it here, pulled back, touched it once again, pulled back below that 8 EMA. Trailing stop right now on the hourly is 562.29, still holding in there at that first ATR band to the downside, pretty much where we have been on this rally, still below the 8 EMA, but looking at the 4-hour chart, just continues to march up here. Did overthrow that second ATR band, almost getting to the third, 567, didn't quite get there, still in between these two, and basically no volume showing here on the Qs the way that it did on the SPY. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, this looks a lot weaker here on the Russell. 2 down candles in a row, down 0.4, did get below my level at 221.49, closed below at 221.43. After hours, you're seeing a little bit of a bounce there. We'll see if that ends up holding tomorrow. Momentum bearish. RSI continues to look a little bit bearish there. We'll see if this SMA continues to be resistance. You did see a little bit of volume come through as well. This looks like a topping pattern, something that I kind of expected to see more on the SPY in the NASDAQ, but of course you got tech doing weird things over there. But the broader economy, the Russell 2000 is doing more in line with the expectation. Big reversal candle, big midpoint here, double topping style pattern, looking to sell a little bit more. That is concerning. And then looking at the Dow, continues to show this kind of bull flag, continues to reject off that 445.16 level, and then sold off from there. It's holding up a little bit after hours, but momentum on RSI still showing that same kind of story, looks a little bearish. Moving over to the Mag 7. Mag 7 finally hit the level there, 337.79. That is the high back here from 31 January. Then price rejected from there, and we did sell off a little bit, selling a little bit more after hours. Finally got the touch. Is this the rejection zone that we were looking for? And then we'll finally see the Mag 7 pull back just a little bit. RSI still at pretty much overbought conditions. Wouldn't say anything really has changed here, but we did finally hit that critical level on the Mag 7. Wasn't sure we would get there. I thought we might kind of just wiggle around in here before selling, but now we've touched it and it'll be interesting to see what price does from this zone here. Moving over to Microsoft and Apple. Apple tried to go a little higher, once again wicking this zone of rejection. We touched it once again and sold. We didn't sell back below the level to 1155, so if you're trading bullish, that is your support right now. Did get a slight step to bullish momentum. Interesting. Thought this might just kind of roll here, but Apple showing a little bit of strength. Maybe we get that bigger continuation to 217. You got the 144 EMA there at 217.84, so pretty much in line with that level. Touch that level and then we'll see what happens. Again, a little bit more bullish here, surprisingly so. And then looking at Microsoft, came down to the trend, hit the 9 EMA, 506.06, touched that level almost to the penny, and then bounced up through, and then finished basically unchanged on the day, up 1 penny. So basically flat for 3 days. It'll be interesting to see, is this the start of a smaller topping pattern? Seems like we're starting to see that a little bit more across the board. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA, both of these going negative on the day, down 0.35 and 0.6% respectively. Tesla hitting that next level, 336.67. That was the next level that we had in mind. That was your take profit. If you bought the breakout at 324, touched that level, overthrew it briefly, and then sold off, finishing negative on the day. So your support now is back to 324.47, back to where we started. Momentum is still bullish here. RSI is still bullish. You still have trend resistance here around 340. But if you get a break of that 324 level, then you got trend down here 320, and then my next level would be that 313.80 area. So looking for this to break down. I'm still a little bit bearish here on Tesla, but of course we're going to get earnings soon, and that is really going to dictate where we go from here. And then looking at NVIDIA, 2 sell candles in a row. Haven't seen that for a while. You've had just a little bit of pullback and then very strong pushes to the upside. Do we pull back to the 9 EMA here? Around 168.31. Not a whole lot of pullback, but maybe just a little bit set to come. It's drifting down a little bit after hours as well. Moving over to Amazon and Alphabet, these actually had really, really nice days, 1.4% going right to that trend here on Amazon. And then you got Alphabet headed to that same trend line in this same area. You can see right here, next level is that 193 level. Current price 191. I would expect we're going to get that. Can earnings be strong enough to push us through back towards your all-time high up around the 208 area? I'm just not really sure that that's possible, but Google's done really, really well since here in April. Really powerful to hear. What they need to tell us is some good stuff around AI and that their search business is not going to deteriorate so fast and so strongly that AI is going to be able to take its place and be very profitable. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that. Can they justify this valuation in here around the 190 to 205 area? That is the concern. This is the all-time high. Do we throw big wicks, get a big sell price action off of that earnings? Be very careful here on Alphabet around that 193 area. And then looking at Amazon a little closer here, you can see the same structure, rising wedge pattern. We're right at it. This has been rejection every time. Do we get an overthrow and a breakdown? And then we get that bearish culmination on this rising wedge. That is again the concern here. 233 is that kind of all-time high level that I look at. Not quite your actual all-time highs, but it was the peak before we had the overthrow and the sell. If we get there again, I would expect there will be some sellers in this area. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, you can see staples throwing some wicks once again. 81.18 continues to be resistance 2 days in a row. Selling that zone, likely to get a lower low at this point with that high, lower high structure, looking for a low, kind of lower low in the 78 area at this point. And then looking at discretionaries, throwing another wick to this zone. We got really close to touching it here in this kind of 224.50 area. Momentum back to bullish, so that's a little bit on the bull side of the trade, looking to see if we can get back to 227. That is kind of the midpoint of this topping pattern that we had. If we can get there, maybe we look for a push towards this next peak around 234.50 or so. But for now, 227, we'll see if we reject from here and continue lower, or if we're going to push through here and look for that next bullish price action. Really, you need to see strong returns from Tesla. Of course, Amazon is coming up, but not quite yet. Moving over to real estate and gold, I wanted to highlight these here just for a little bit. They did see a little bit of a pop. We had a long consolidation, got above the 200. We haven't been above the 200 on real estate since back here, all the way from January of 25 up until this kind of March timeframe. And then we had the big sell, said buy everything as fast as you could. But we're back above the 200 here. We're holding up. Is this going to push to 42.80? Not a ton of movement. Of course, this is XLRE. Doesn't move a lot. There's good dividends on it, but seems to be a little bit of an acceleration here. I wonder what that means for interest rates and for cuts. This should go higher if we're expecting cuts, and that seems to be what's happening, at least for now. And then looking at gold here, pushing back to that trend line. We've been watching this as a topping pattern, and I still believe that's possible, but this is starting to look a little bit more like a rising triangle with this higher low, with this kind of flat top coming in here. If this breaks out, I think there's potential for more upside on gold. So keep an eye on it. We're right in this kind of peak zone. Look for that breakout if we get it. Lots of upside to go, in my opinion. Moving over to breadth. This is exactly what I was worried about here on breadth. Breadth continues to move lower. We did have a slight retracement and then a big drop here back below that 51.75 level, back below 62.25. We're probably going to get an acceleration here. Both of these look bad. They look like a resumption of this kind of selling price action we've seen over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Definitely something to watch for, and this is more evidence of some weakness. Moving over to the dollar did sell off as we expected it to. Continued to do this topping pattern. You had the dip low, lower high setup, big sell through. Still expecting this to be a bit of a bottoming pattern here. Higher low setup or a double bottom and a big continuation is what I'm looking for, but for now, we're in that second part of the bottoming pattern, and that continues to be true, at least based on the evidence we have so far. Moving over to bonds. Bonds continue to bounce here the last couple days in a row, and I think this is partly because markets are looking for that cut. Is it going to happen in July? I still don't believe that's really going to happen, but I still think we will get a cut in September at the very latest, and that is starting to approach pretty soon, and you can see bonds are starting to react to that. Makes sense with real estate going higher, dividends becoming a little bit more valuable, and this fits well with that thesis. Bonds going higher, real estate going higher, people trying to get yields before we see rate cuts. Moving over to the VIX. VIX did show a little bit of bullishness once again off of this same zone. Really, it's in the same range. Nothing crazy here, but it is a slight pop. Do we get a slight acceleration? Probably not for now. Still have a couple more days of trading in here before this structure is going to break down. Just playing the waiting game, waiting for this structure to change. Momentum did flip to bullish. RSI still in that same kind of bullish breakout, retest, breakout kind of structure. That is what we're looking for. But of course, it is still this downtrend with the lower highs. So no changes yet, just some slight hints that this might go higher. Moving over to my accounts, I ended up trying to trade a little bit bullish and then got crushed on the Russell. That went lower, broke my structure, and then I got stopped out of that position. So small loser there. And then I tried to sell a covered call on the Qs looking for that 568 trend line. I thought we would hold and push through that high, but we ended up double topping and selling. I kept the call on here. Don't actually love that. We'll see if we get a little bit more follow through to the downside. We're kind of hovering after hours, basically unchanged. 565 is the level, made a little bit of money on that. I actually rolled it down to 565, so basically unchanged on that, but I am looking for just a little bit more bearishness out of the NASDAQ. Even if we are going to go a little bit higher over the next week, I think we'll probably go down first. And another thing to consider here is the IV rank. The IV rank is extremely low here on the Qs. That marks a lot of complacency, so it just seems to me that we are going to be due for a pullback, but we're just not quite there yet. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of the war on the Fed. Is there going to be anything from that? Will it actually affect markets, or is it just a bunch of talk and nonsense? Let me know. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.